Hello everybody, I'm Forrest McCreelove, and this is Speedplay Horselords number 14. We left off at the very precipice of our invasion of Russia. Russia, as you can see, is a terrible morose of just horrible borders, overlapping claims, and just a complete disaster. The only way we're going to effectively invade Russia and all of the states therein is by declaring war on Russia and all of the states therein simultaneously, occupying the entirety of the country and then making peace with every state. Anything else risks us losing or just misplacing provinces, not actually annexing them, and having to go into second or third or fourth or fifth wars, and just generally dragging on the whole enterprise to an absurd degree. You'll notice that we have a humongous group of armies on the border just waiting to cross. Immediately they're given the order on January 3rd, 986. Got a little ahead of myself. We begin the operation and begin the invasion of all that is Russia. There are, of course, going to be revolts throughout. That's just something that we've dealt with for the last several hundred years. No real concern. There are enemy armies roving into our territory. As always, they will only be able to take lands that have already become pasteurized. We also begin hiring essentially every mercenary that we can, as quite frankly, at this point, we are absurdly wealthy. And really, what else are we going to spend our money on? We go ahead and continue the advance throughout the Russian interior. We have only really bridged the very most initial area. Even with all of these troops, Russia is just such a vast swath of territory. Even with all of our armies and all of our mercenaries, we are still hardly touching it. Khazaria is barely even affected by our invasions. Meanwhile, one of our clans adopts our faith, which is great news, although admittedly not all that significant, and we begin to pull our remaining forces out of Great Britain. Luckily, we managed to double the size of our navy, so we're able to take entire infernal columns at once. There is a bit of an issue with enemy armies in the Ukraine. However, we have so many forces nearby that it doesn't even begin to matter. We continue to send our forces just throughout, hopefully taking over areas from Khazaria. We'll continue to hire mercenaries. Enemy armies still harass us, however, it is not really a problem. At this point, I realize that it's probably unlikely that we'll be able to fully annex all of Russia simultaneously. We pull our forces from Khazaria to move them into the other minor states. I realize Khazaria is a distinct color from all the others, and so long as we just occupy all the other states, we'll be able to make peace with all of them simultaneously and then begin pasteurization throughout. We also hand over the final provinces of Western Europe to our Western Roman Imperial clan, essentially, and continue the advance with our armies just throughout. Now, if you look, we have converted to our culture most of the world, as once we pasteurize provinces, they become our culture, our religion. You'll notice there are a few places that are not our religion. Those have the occasional holding. Some of them are controlled by our subclans, which will be an issue for another day. At this point, with most of our forces deep in Russia, we're just going to have to leave that be. You'll notice economically everything is red, and our military has delved deep into the Russian interior. We still have a few territories not technically under our control just yet. As we continue to pasteurize regions, we will be able to pull more forces over. As always, I am incredibly speeding up the actual process of pasteurization, as it is just an incredibly monotonous series of clicks. Every time we go full speed, though, we generally get an extra army or more to send further into the depths of Russia, and fairly soon we'll be able to start making peace with all of these states. Making peace is probably a bit of a euphemism. We're just completely overthrowing the old regimes. At any rate, we are doing very well at that. There are still the occasional enemy armies, but we are taking care of those. They have control over a few forts that they've built, and really that's not anything that matters. Now you'll notice we've lost around 13,000 gold since this series of wars began. However, they're all essentially ending now, which means new lands that we can begin to pillage, which means new incomes for our country. And with that all said and done, we've essentially gone ahead and annexed everything but Khazaria itself. We'll keep going forward with these rapid pillaging moves and bringing the armies that we free up into Khazaria. Here's a bit of a massive one. Our armies are now completely taking over the border. Now, an interesting thing is that most of their provinces are actually already pillaged to the very hilt, which means, since we're nomadic, we're not able to build forts, so we're going to have to keep an actual army on each province. So we begin splitting our armies up and dividing them in order to take over every single Khazarian province and hold on to them. There are the occasional fortress and enemy army that will be a bit of an issue to deal with. Ultimately, though, it is just a massive mop-up operation across the entire Russian steppe. Our forces, however, are proving more than adequate, and by splitting up into groups of 1,000, we essentially quadruple the amount of land we can cover, which means that it's not going to be a very long wait. Also, the only time we have to worry about provinces revolting is if they have holdings on them. Since the vast majority of these provinces don't have holdings, we can move all of our split infernal columns over to the Balkans, where we will begin to reform them for the conquest of the one place in the world that still denies our power. I'm speaking, of course, about India. Meanwhile, our remaining infernal columns stay in their positions and continue to pillage the remaining lands of Europe and Northern Asia. Our armies, over 100,000 men, which we have just freed up, begin the march towards India, where we will conclude the pasteurization portion of this campaign. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.